Hello friends, and welcome to our YouTube channel called All Is Ready, Come to the Wedding. Today's presentation is entitled Baal, the Purpose, the Faith, the Religion. It is now about 29 centuries since the Lord has called Elijah the prophet, to stand for truth and denounce Baal worship on high places. And it would seem logical for us as Seventh-day Adventists that ancient history and that history of that sort could be filed away and kept in our archives and forgotten, pretty much. Because if you ask Seventh-day Adventists about what constitutes Baal worship today, and if we still have it today, most of us will say maybe some of the things that are happening inside of our denomination, but this just happened during Elijah's time with what the climax on the Mount of Carmel. From the human viewpoint, we want to forget, we want to just look at something that happened a long time ago. But the Lord and the great controversy, it's still in its full swing, and you can see this during our present time. And the Lord continued to work on His eternal principle, on God's eternal purpose, and the chain of history kind of remained unbroken. And you can see, if you look back in history, that every generation of God's people, they were lied by this false system, and Baal was a lot of time the purpose, the faith, and the religion of that particular generation. In our own history, it has been more than a century, 130 years, more than 130 years since the Lord sent us a message, a very precious message that Ellen White keeps insisting that resembles a lot with the message that was sent many centuries ago by Elijah. Even our Seventh-day Adventist preaching, we hear about the third Elijah. And 2 years after the 1888 General Conference meeting from Minneapolis, Ellen White saw one of the most penetrating and serious of all her visions, and she was in a deep communion with God, and the room was filled with light, and she saw herself bearing a message to an assembly that seemed to be the General Conference. I was moved by the Spirit of God to make a most earnest appeal, for I was impressed that great danger was before at the heart of the work. So that's the vision, and she saw a great danger, and the danger she saw had its roots in the 1888 failure and rejection, and the consequences were tied to the unbelief, to the apostasy of ancient Israel. And she warns us. The prejudices and opinions that prevailed in Minneapolis are not dead by any means. The seeds sown there in some hearts are ready to spring into life and bear a like harvest. The tops have been cut down, but the roots have never been eradicated, and they still bear the unholy fruit to poison the judgment, pervert the perceptions, and blind the understanding of those with whom you connect in regard to the message and the messengers. Infidelity has been making inroads into our ranks, for it is the fashion to depart from Christ and give place to skepticism. With many, the cry of their hearts has been, "We will not have this man to reign over us." Baal is the choice. The religion of many among us will be the religion of apostate Israel, because they have loved their own way and forsake the way of the Lord. The true religion, the only religion of the Bible that teaches forgiveness only through the merits of a crucified and risen Savior, that advocates righteousness by the faith of the Son of God, has been slighted, spoken against, ridiculed, and rejected. What kind of future is before us if we shall fail to come into the unity of the faith, the 1888 message? After more than a century, my friends, we can see that this is the harsh reality of our days. It would be much more comfortable to say that whatever experiences were portrayed after the rejection of 1888 does not belong to us. We can apply it to the world, we can apply it in general, and you can even completely overlook this whole situation. But unfortunately, the great controversy still continues. We reject this wonderful message, and Satan persists in his endeavors to destroy our central pillar and to destroy the real experience in which this movement was invited to be part of. Ellen White says, Everything may move forward amid apparent prosperity, but Satan is wide awake and is studying and counseling with his evil angels another mode of attack where he can be successful. The great controversy will wax stronger and stronger and will become more and more determined. Mind will be arrayed against mind, plans against plans, principles of heaven origin against principles of Satan. Truth in its varied phases will be in conflict with error in its ever-varying increasing form, and which, if possible, will deceive the very elect. Unsanctified ministers are arraying themselves against God. They are praising Christ and the God of this world in the same breath. While professedly they receive Christ, they embrace Barabbas, and by their actions say, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Let the son of deceit and false witness be entertained by a church that has had great light, great evidence, and that church will disregard the message the Lord has sent and receive the most unreasonable assertions and false suppositions and false theories. Many will stand our pulpit with the torch of false prophecy in their hands, kindled from the hellish torch of Satan. The conflict is to wax fiercer and fiercer. Satan will take the field and personate Christ. He will misrepresent, misapply, and pervert everything he possibly can to deceive, if possible, the very elect. Now, this solemn evaluation and prediction of Baal worship concerns our church, concerns our members, concerns our ministers, because Baal worship did not die in Mount Carmel. No, indeed, we may not really understand what the children of Israel were saying when they cried, "Oh Baal, hear us," because in the Hebrew language this meant, "Oh Lord, hear us." Baal simply means Lord or Master, and the name, with slight variation, is found in numerous ancient languages from Babylonian to Greek. In particular, we need to remember that Baal was the god of the Canaanites, the apostate children of Ham. They had that type of false and rebellious ideas of Cain, that the fruit of the ground would suffice for a living sacrifice, and this was handed down to Canaanites. And Baal was accepted as the chief god who ruled nature in general, and that's why you have that religion of pantheism. Now, the pantheism of the Canaanites was no difference from the crisis of pantheism which crept into our church soon after the rejection of 1888. Keep in mind that because of the rejection of the 1888 message, we had the crisis with the Holy Flesh movement, and then we have this pantheistic crisis. We had those pretentious sophistries and brilliant sparkling ideas that were produced by the great deceivers and passed from mind to mind. We have Kellogg and everything that happened over there. We had the direct desire of the deceiver to destroy the pillars of our faith. And if we are saved by that crisis was by the fact that Ellen White was very persistent in her warnings to help us as a messenger of Lord in that time. And the startling thing is that Ellen White is the one who says that this is just the alpha of deadly heresies. Whatever happened at the beginning of century is the alpha of deadly heresies, and that the omega will follow and be received by those who are not willing to heed the warning God has given. And that's why she says she trembled for our people. She trembled for our people. And I don't think it was just for her people. She trembled for us too. So it took about a century for Israel to reach their unconscious apostate condition of Baal worship. Now for us it's been more than a century. You have 130 years and still counting since we were deceived by the alpha of deadly heresies. And clearly, then we have the warning that God's people can change leaders and not know it, can change allegiance without knowing, especially between the leaders of the first department and the leader in the second department, because you know what happened in the Vision of the Thrones. The peril is magnified, and it's better understood when you come to realize that the apostasy did not reside only with Ahab and Jezebel, but there were 450 priests of Baal plus another 400 prophets of the grove who formed the steering committee for the nation. We have 850 prophets that they were worshiping, and they were forming the community and the leadership of that nation. It was not just Ahab and Israel and Jezebel. And Elijah recognized, was a keen observer of the fact that Baal assumed the place of Yahweh. And if we say that we need for Elijah to return, and Ellen White says that message was the same, the Elijah's message is the 1888 message. We rejected Elijah. Now that means that Satan has prevailed. That means Baal worship has prevailed since 1888. Please recall that when Elijah threw down the challenge, if the Lord be God, follow him, but if Baal, then follow him, we have in their answer what I would say like a videotape of the lost church, of the Laodicean church. And the record, the inspired record says, the people answered him not a word. What does it mean? This means that they were not for, they were not against, they were not hot, they were not cold, they were lukewarm. That's the real meaning of this. For if you see that movie that happened 3,000 years ago, they did not know, they did not understand their true condition is exactly as the true witness says to the Laodicean church. Unconsciously, they had changed leaders, they had changed their allegiance. When we ask ourselves, so does Baal worship exist today? Is Baal the faith, the religion, and the purpose of our church? Does Baal worship exist today? I mean, if you just put a quick search of the index of the writings of Ellen White, shows that there are more than 100 references to Baal. More than 100. Go ahead and try for a search engine. You will see that the situation is pretty terrible. And Ellen White did not wrote this almost 100 times or even more, just for the sake that she liked to write about Baal. You don't find sermons anymore that talks about Baal as being the faith, the purpose, and the religion of our times. But this is the harsh reality that we live right now. We need to be aware of that. We also saw the Salamanca vision, the one that took place in 1890, which revealed the consequences, the terrible consequences, the dramatic consequences of the rejection of the unbelief that characterized the 1888 General Conference, and the fact that a false Christ would sneak himself among us. Adventists had long known that at the very end, Satan would not only try to carry on the work of God, which he's doing after 1844, but we also know from the Great Controversy, from the book Great Controversy, that Satan will try to appear in the likeness of Jesus Christ. He will counterfeit, he will impersonate Christ's return, and this is explained by Ellen White in the book and in this familiar setting. As the crowning act in the great drama of deception, Satan himself will personate Christ as a majestic being of dazzling brightness, unsurpassed by anything mortal eyes have yet beheld. The shout of triumph rings out upon the earth. Christ has come, Christ has come. The people prostrate themselves in adoration before him, while he lifts up his hands and pronounces a blessing upon them. His voice is soft and subdued, yet full of melody. This is the strong, almost overmastering delusion. Now, long before this final act of deception, Satan will have conditioned the people to accept his methods. This means the use of brilliant and sparkling ideas, as Ellen White says, charming philosophical speculations. We'll have the principles of Satan. We'll have the principle of Satan pitted against the principles of heavenly origin. We'll have unsanctified ministers arraying themselves against God, praising Christ and the God of this world in the same breath. This is the real meaning of the work that Satan is doing before impersonating Christ. And as the vision pointed out, the religion among us will be the religion of apostate Israel. Baal, the faith, the purpose, the religion. Baal worship. My friends, please understand that this the verbal use of the name of Jesus Christ and all this Christian terminology means nothing so far as identifying and establishing truth versus error. Baal is a false Christ. Baal is a false Christ. A false Christ is a modern Baal. And even though this system comes disguised as a worshiping Christ, but which evades the real pillars and the invitation to come to the wedding, and that of the cleansing of the sanctuary, and that of the work of the most holy place, and blotting out the sins, and understanding the importance of Ezekiel 36:23, this is not gospel. No matter how much we may profess to serve Christ, no matter what our position may be in the church, whatever self becomes the object of devotion, then we have Baal worship. And this is just the consequence of understanding that Satan is commandeering the first department, and he is preaching and is the biggest supporter of righteousness by faith only, but not for the wedding, not for going to the experience where humanity will combine with divinity. And you can see this myriads of form that takes place in our church, and it is frightening to a certain point. In a certain sense, I believe the ministry is in the greatest peril than any other segment in the church. That's why the true witness is talking with the angel of the church, which is our leadership. Because you can see this, it is among the ministry that we have that kind of ladder climbing fraternity that has been established, as if the office could enhance the character. We can see this. We can see the politics. We can see the coveting for promotion, the office seeking, and the prestige and power, and the respect and the motivation that hide behind the ministry. And there we have a form of understanding the prophets of Baal. Now, why does the remnant church needs plaques and trophies and certificates and diplomas and all the other trappings the world uses and loves? Where is the true message of righteousness of Christ in connection with the law? What is the invitation to come to the wedding? Where is Revelation 19 as the most important chapter and the most important good news for our present truth, as our present truth? Where is the invitation to come to the great day of atonement for the living? Just how can we find ourselves in this present confusion, and why do we not understand that the true witness is talking about this as being naked, as being wretched? Ellen White confirmed, the present age is one of idolatry as verily as was that in which Elijah lived. No outward shrine may be visible, there may be no image for the eyes to rest upon. Multitudes have a wrong conception of God and His attributes, and are as truly serving a false god as were the worshippers of Baal. In this age, Antichrist will appear as the true Christ, but the true leader of all this is Satan, clothed as an angel of light. Men will be deceived and will exalt him to the place of God and defy him. Christ will be personified, but on one point there will be a marked distinction. Satan will turn the people from the law of God. Those who are not wholly consecrated to God may be led to the work of Satan, while yet they flatter themselves that they are in the service of Christ. And the apostasy prevailing today is like that which the prophets, they overspread Israel. I mean, that's what Ellen White says over here. We have this exaltation of the human above the divine. We have the praise of popular leaders. We have the politics. We have the diplomas. We have this worship for money. And we have the placing of teaching, of seminars, of teaching of science about the truth of revelation. And we have this reality in our university that multitudes of professors are following Baal. So in conclusion, never in its long and tumultuous history has God's people been able to observe the subtle distortion through which Baal has always crept into our church and pretending to be God. This has happened in every generation, and no generation has ever recognized that this can happen with them. Why then we say that this cannot happen to us? Are we much different than them? We're not having the same human nature. We don't have the same reactions. We can see what I said to be the secondaries, consequences of understanding that we rejected the 1888 message, and what's happening with our ministry and the politics and the leadership and the problems that we have among our theology and our preaching and all the problems that we face in our church. Now we are experiencing the same situation that happened with the people of Israel during the time of Elijah. Now please keep in mind that Baal never directly and radically attacked the ways of the Lord. No, you have a small custom borrowed from the neighbors. You have a beautiful tradition that it's good for entertaining our children. You have an innocent feast superimposed over the sanctuary services, and over generations They came to be pillars of faith. They came to be milestone whose abandonment meant apostasy from the faith given to the saints. The hidden customs were never introduced through the front door of their faith. That's why they responded in anger when the Lord's messenger, they were telling them they were worshiping Baal without even knowing. Now, how could they worship Baal when they were God's people? How was it possible for God's prophets or God's messengers to tell them that they were worshiping Baal? Such a thing was unacceptable for them, and this is also unacceptable for us. If you tell to our church that we still worship Baal by rejecting the 1888 message and by not understanding the difference between the first department and the second department, and the fact that Revelation 19 should be the present truth of our generation, and humanity plus divinity should be the main topic and the main message of us, of our church, and for the world. I mean, they will never agree. As other generation never agreed with that. Our people usually recognizes that there is apostasy in the church. Our people acknowledge that we have not fulfilled our mission. Our people recognize that the worldly spirit has entered the church. Our people recognizes that in general we do not leave the healthcare reform that we preach to others. Other people will recognize that the reform and revival are still somewhere in the future. Our people probably recognize that there may be even our fault for delaying the return of Christ. But one thing it's firmly denied by everyone permanently, that it would be at least even be possible for us to worship Baal. And this was the typical attitude of every generation of God's people in the past. Now, Ellen White, our prophet, says with certainty that this is exactly what would happen to God's people at the end of time. Listen to what she says in 1891. There has been a departure from God, and there has not as yet been zealous work in repenting and coming back to the first love. Infidelity has had a large place among us. It is the fashion to depart from Christ, to forsake the Lord, and accept skepticism. We will not have this man to reign over us. Baal will be the purpose, the faith, the religion of a sorrowful number among us, because they choose their own way instead of God's way. The true religion, the only religion of the Bible, believing in the forgiveness of sin, the righteousness of Christ, and the blood of the Lamb, has been not only slighted and spoken against, ridiculed and criticized, but suspicions and jealousies have been created, leading into fanaticism and atheism. The true life in Jesus Christ alone is the true religion of the Bible. The Holy Spirit of God is to be an active, working principle in the religious character. The love of Christ must become an abiding principle to make the soul fruitful into good works. It should be the force and power of every message that falls from the human lips. Why do we not observe that Baal is the purpose, the faith, the religion of our people? As Ellen White says, and Ellen White writes in 1891, why do we see this highly authorized, strong voices in our church and the leadership of our church and publicly declaring the fact that we're worshiping the same Christ? We have the same doctrines. We have the same understanding like all the Christian churches. We have this ecumenical movement, and we believe that the message in our present truth should be justification by faith only, and not the perfecting of character of the last generation that will resemble like Jesus Christ, only if we come to the wedding, only if humanity is combined with divinity. Now, who is this Christ seated on a throne before whom the whole world prostrates and cries out, Father, give us thy Spirit? And what is the remnant church looking on? What is the church looking in this crowd of people that they know, because we know exactly what happened and who's on that throne? And the shock of awakening to reality, if it ever to occur, will be devastating for Baal's purpose, faith, and religion, and will bring the whole world together for one last confrontation when God's glory will be revealed in the righteousness of Christ. But we need to come to the wedding. A sorrowful number among us will support this coalition against those who are going to participate at the wedding of the Lamb, without having the slightest suspicion that the man of iniquity has settled in the temple of God, pretending to be God. There's going to be a lot of people who will embrace without restraints Baal's purpose, faith, and religion, according to what Ellen White says, convinced that they are working to preach the gospel to the ends of the earth for the unity for which Christ prayed. Our only hope is to come to the wedding. Otherwise, we will embrace without restraint Baal's purpose, faith, and religion. If we do not come to the wedding, if we don't understand the service, the difference between the first apartment and the second apartment, if we don't understand the invitation to come to the great day of atonement for the living, then we will embrace without restraint Baal's purpose, faith, and religion. We have only one hope, and that hope is the wedding of the Lamb. So all is ready. Come to the wedding.